June, June 18th, 2016. So we can start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so we've been examining the first sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. This is called the Mūlapariyāya Sutta, the discourse on the root. And the sutta begins when the Buddha says to the monks, he says, I will teach you a discourse on the root of all things, Dhamma Mūlapariyāyang Bhikkhave Dese Sami. And so you could see just from the title of the sutta, or the description of it, that it's an extremely deep and important sutta. It's a kind of sutta that cuts through all excessive verbiage and takes us directly to understanding the root of this whole process of beginningless samsara. And the sutta unfolds, as I said last week, as a description of the cognitive process of four types of individuals. Yeah, I don't think I have a copy of myself. Okay, so the four types of individuals is beginning from the lowest going up, is the uninstructed worldling, or the untaught ordinary person, then the learner or trainee, the one on the path, and third is the disciple arahant, and then the fourth is the Buddha himself. And so last week we described the section, we examined the section on the cognitive process of the uninstructed worldling. And the text explains this cognitive process in relation to 24 objects, which I call the 24 bases of conceiving. And so it begins, it takes, as the fullest example, it takes the way the worldling thinks about the earth element. And so it begins when the ordinary person first perceives earth, then perceives earth as earth. And as the commentary explains, perceiving earth as earth means that already a subtle distortion has entered even into the perception of the ordinary person, the uninstructed ordinary person, so that the ordinary person grasps upon the percept and takes it as indicative of some kind of solid, substantial, self-existent entity. Then from the perception, the cognitive process moves into the way the ordinary person thinks about the object of perception. And this thinking is described by the word or the verb manyati, which is translated here as conceives. Or we might even maybe more accurately render this misconceives. And then the text explains different ways in which the ordinary person misconceives the earth element. And these ways are distinguished according to what are called different modes of declension of nouns in Pali. Declension of a noun means, oh, this gets a bit too complicated. Okay, in English it's indicated by prepositions. You see, we don't decline our nouns, but we use prepositions to show their grammatical position. Okay, so he conceives earth. He conceives earth. So this is the accusative case. So he conceives in earth. In Pali, this is the locative case, setting up location. He conceives apart from earth. That's the ablative case, establishing a difference. He conceives earth to be mine. This shows the sort of where grasping enters into the cognitive process. And then he delights in earth. And delights here, the word delights implies that there's some subtle craving involved in sort of trying to extract the pleasure or enjoyment out of the object. And then the reason, the Buddha raises the question, why is that? What is the reason for that? The reason is because he has not fully understood it. And full understanding, according in the sutta way of explanation, that is the prerogative of the arahant. It's only the arahant who has fully understood the whole domain of experience. Okay, so that is the passage on the ordinary person, beginning with the earth element, then it brings in the other three material elements, water, fire, and air. Then it brings in beings. These are taken to be the beings in the lower realms. Then the gods, various classes of gods. Then it goes to the four formless or immaterial realms of existence, the base of infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception. Then we have a set of four terms, a way of classifying the objects of perception: the seen, visible forms; the heard, sounds; the sensed, the objects of the other three senses: odors, tastes, tactile sensations. Then the pair of unity and diversity. Then the all. And finally, even nibbana. Okay, so that is just a review of what we covered last week. Okay, and now we come to the next section. Now I'm on page 87, about to start section 27. This is the description of the cognitive process of the type of person who is called in Pali the Seka. Okay, the word Seka, it's related to the noun Sika. Sika means training. And so the texts sometimes speak about the three types of training. Adisila Sika, the training in the higher virtuous behavior. Adicita Sika, the training in the higher mind, which means the training in concentration or samadhi. And then adipanya sika, the training in the higher wisdom. And so one who undertakes these three types of training is called a seka, a learner. Here's the word is used. Yeah, the disciple in higher training. I render seka. But technically, the word seka has a technical meaning. In a broad sense, it can signify anybody who's engaged in the training. But in a more specific or more precise technical sense, it signifies one who has reached at least the irreversible path of stream entry, up to and including one who has reached the path to arahantship. But not yet the arahant, or not the arahant, because the arahant has finished the training. Okay, now in between the uninstructed worldling or the untaught ordinary person and the seka in this narrow sense, there's another type of person who is not described in this sutta. And I hope this is where most of us will find ourselves if we're not yet sekas or arahats. And this is called the kalyana putujana. The kalyana putujana, this means the good or virtuous worldling. So this person is called a putujana, a worldling or an ordinary person, in the sense that he has not yet reached the irreversible path to stream entry. But he's different from the uninstructed worldling, the untaught ordinary person, in that the virtuous worldling has gained acquaintance, some knowledge of the noble teaching, and is engaged in the practice of the teaching, the serious and sincere practice of the teaching. So this is the person who is still short of, you could say that this is the sort of the threshold, which we call the breakthrough. And above this, one is on the irreversible path to the final goal. And then here, below this, is the realm of the ordinary, uninstructed ordinary persons. And then here we have the virtuous worldlings who have not yet eradicated any defilements, but are still practicing, accept the Dharma out of trust or confidence, have taken up at least the firm adherence to the precepts, and are engaged in training the mind in mindfulness, concentration, or wisdom. But in this sutta, here the Buddha is speaking about one who is a trainee or disciple in training in the technical sense, one who has reached at least the path of stream entry. Okay, so the text says about this kind of person, now I'll read from the text. Here, a bhikkhu who is one in higher training, that is the bhikkhu who is a seka. Whose mind has not yet reached the goal, and who is still aspiring to the supreme security from bondage. This is the anuttarang yoga kemang, release from the bonds of sensual desire, craving for existence, views, wrong views, and ignorance. Okay, of this disciple, it says that he directly knows earth as earth. And so I presume that there is has to be a stage in which even this disciple in higher training has the perception of earth. That seems to be, though it's not mentioned in the sutta, but it's understood. Because in order to understand anything, one first has to perceive it. Okay, but in the case of the worldling, first he perceives earth, then he perceives earth as earth. That is, he grasps upon the perception, the percept, and takes it to be indicative, to be signifying some kind of solid, substantial reality. But in the case of the disciple in higher training, it says, he directly knows earth as earth. And here the verb used is abhijanati. Okay, if we know anything about Pali, we know that the verb janati means to know. So we have many verbs constructed on the basis of janati. Like even the verb pajanati, to understand, from which we get panya, wisdom, is based on janati. And the prefix abhi suggests something superior. So this is a superior kind of, a superior way of knowing. It's not just like knowing simply as a matter of fact, but it's knowing in terms, you could say knowing in depth, knowing clearly, knowing accurately. And also, abhi suggests directness. So that's why we render it directly knows. And in the sutta way of explanation, this usually means knowing in terms of, we call the framework of the Four Noble Truths. So one knows a thing in terms of its essential characteristics, particularly knowing things to be impermanent, dukkha, unsatisfactory, and non-self. Then knowing the origin of the thing, knowing its cessation, and knowing the way to its cessation. Okay, so the disciple in higher training directly knows earth as earth. So this would be knowing the essential characteristic of the earth element, knowing the origin, cessation, and way to cessation in regard to the earth element. Okay, then the text goes on to say, having directly known earth as earth, now we have an injunction, that is an imperative, a command. Following the Pali says that he must not conceive, having directly known earth as earth, he should not conceive earth. He should not conceive in earth. He should not conceive apart from earth. He should not conceive earth to be mine. He should not delight in earth. And for should not conceive, the Pali has mani. See, in the case of the worldling, it said manyati. The worldling conceives or misconceives. But in the case of the disciple in training, the text says manyi. Ma is used for a prohibition, a negative imperative. Do not, must not, should not. And in this way, should not conceive. So he should not conceive earth to be mine. He should not delight in earth. And why is that? And then the text says, because he must fully understand it, or he should fully understand it. So the Pali has parinyayam. So parinyayam comes from the verb parijanati, which also you could see is based on that verb janati, to know. Am I getting too academic? Too pedantic? You see, we have some of the students here are also my Pali students, so I'm sometimes not completely clear whether I'm in a Pali class or a simple sutta class. But it's useful to see the interconnections of these words, which they sometimes get lost in translation. So, abhijanati, the disciple in training, has abhijanati. He has this direct knowledge, but not yet parijanati, not yet that full or complete understanding. And so the purpose of training is to advance from abhijanati, from direct knowledge or higher knowledge, to parijanati, to full understanding. And to be able to advance, the disciple is given this injunction or command: do not misconceive what you are perceiving. Okay, now according to the commentaries, there are 3 roots of misconception, 3 modes in which conceiving takes place. I think I explained this last week. That is, the 3 sort of modes of conceiving are craving, conceit, and wrong views. And so through craving, one is inclined to take things to be mine. Through conceit, one develops or gives rise to the idea, I am. First, the idea of I speak, I do, I think, I act, and behind all of this there seems to be an I. And so we grasp on the idea of I, and we think, since there's this I who's doing and thinking all of these things, therefore I am. And then one speculates about what is this I, and then one comes up with a theory, a doctrine, a belief, a thesis about what I am, and that is the view of self, the wrong views of self. Okay, now the disciple in the higher training, when he reaches the stage of stream entry, he eradicates which of these 3 kinds of conceiving? Craving, conceit, and views. Which does the disciple in training eliminate? What? Okay. One says craving and conceit. Jin says wrong views. Okay, Jin is correct. Because at the level of stream entry, the disciple sees into the truth of the Dhamma and eliminates all views of self and all the other wrong views that develop out of the views of self. But even the disciple in training still has craving and conceit. And because of this still craving and conceit, the disciple can still engage in misconceiving in terms of craving and conceit. And so therefore the Buddha gives this injunction, do not misconceive. When he says, do not misconceive, it has nothing anymore to do with wrong views, but it means do not conceive things in terms of craving as potential objects to be mine, and do not conceive in terms of conceit with the idea of I am. And there's a beautiful little sutta which illustrates this, or a little sutta that illustrates this beautifully. I asked Lorena to send it out with the announcement yesterday. And this is a sutta that occurs in the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 22, the connected discourses on the 5 aggregates, and it's sutta number 89. It's called the Kemaka Sutta because the monk who speaks is named Kemaka. Okay, so when the sutta opens, there's this monk named Kemaka who is sick, afflicted, gravely ill. And then he meets with a number of elder monks, and after they exchange greetings, I cut out that part of the discourse since it's not so necessary. Then they ask the Venerable Kemaka, they say, there are these 5 aggregates subject to clinging, spoken about by the Buddha. So that's the material form aggregate, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. Do you regard anything among these 5 aggregates as the self or as belonging to the self? Do you have any view of self in regard to these 5 aggregates? And then Venerable Kemaka says that I do not regard any of these 5 aggregates as the self or as belonging to the self. Okay, so then the elder monks they say to him, if you don't regard anything among the 5 aggregates as a self or as belonging to a self, that means you must be an arahant, one who has eliminated all of the asavas, the defilements. But Kemaka is much wiser than these other monks. So he says, even though I don't regard any of these 5 aggregates as the self or as belonging to a self, still I am not an arahant. For the notion I am has not yet been eliminated by me in relation to these 5 aggregates. But I do not regard any among them as this I am. So you could see that initially there's the notions, a very primordial notion, very fundamental notion, I am, which arises just spontaneously. But then when we grasp upon that notion, I am, and then we reflect, what am I? And then we come to some conclusion, this I am this, I am that. Doing so in terms of the 5 aggregates. I am the body, or I am the owner of the body. I am feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. I am standing behind consciousness, the owner of consciousness. Then one has formulated a view of self. One has defined the notion I am as this I am. Okay, so then when Kemaka says this, then the other monks say, when you speak of this I am, what is it that you speak of as I am? You see, you could see from this that the elder monks still have Sakaya Ditti. They still have a subtle view of self, even though if they understand non-self, they won't actually formulate a doctrine of self, but still they have some assumption, where they make the assumption that there must be something corresponding to this I am. So they say, what is it that you speak of as I am? Is it form that you speak of as I am, or do you speak of I am apart from form? You see, even this is sort of mirroring that grammatical structure that we see in the discourse on the root. Either it's this or apart from this. Do you speak of feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness as I am, or do you speak of I am apart from consciousness? So what is it that you call, that you are thinking of when you say you have this notion, I am? And then Khemaka replies, I do not speak of form, feeling, perception, volitions, consciousness as I am, nor do I speak of I am apart from consciousness. Although the notion I am has not yet vanished in me in relation to the 5 aggregates, still I do not regard anything among them as this I am. And then he gives a simile of the scent of a lotus flower. And he says, would one be speaking rightly if one would say the scent belongs to the petals, the scent belongs to the stalk, the scent belongs to the pistils? And the answer is no. And to answer rightly, one would say that the scent belongs to the flower, not to one part or the other. And so then Khemaka repeats the same thing and says, I do not speak of form as I am, or I am apart from form. Although the notion I am has not yet vanished in me in relation to these 5 aggregates, still I do not regard anything among them as this I am. Then he explains, even though a noble disciple has abandoned the 5 lower fetters, this is a disciple at the stage of non-returner, just one stage short of arhatship. Still, in relation to the 5 aggregates, subject to clinging, there lingers in him a residual conceit, I am, a residual desire, I am, a residual underlying tendency, I am, that has not yet been uprooted. So we can see that there's the conceit, I am, so conceit is still there. The desire is craving, I am, is still there. And there's this underlying tendency for the idea, I am, to arise. So that idea, I am, has not yet been uprooted. But sometime later he dwells contemplating the arising and passing away in the 5 aggregates. And then as he contemplates arising and passing away in the 5 aggregates, then that residual conceit, I am, desire, I am, underlying tendency, I am, comes to be uprooted, eliminated. And then he compares this, he uses a simile to illustrate this. It's like a cloth that has been soiled and stained, and so its owners give it to a laundryman. Then, this is the way of washing clothes in ancient India. So the laundryman then scours it with cleaning salt, lye, or cow dung, and rinses it in clean water. And so even though that cloth becomes pure and clean, it still retains a residual smell of the cleaning salt, lye, or cow dung. The laundryman then gives it back to the owners, and the owners put it in a sweet-scented casket. And as a result, that residual smell of the cleaning salts, lye, or cow dung that had not yet vanished would vanish. And so even though the noble disciple has abandoned the 5 lower fetters, still there lingers in him this residual conceit, I am, desire, I am, underlying tendency, I am, that was not yet uprooted. But he dwells contemplating arising and passing away in the 5 aggregates, and as he does so, with the attainment of arhatship, that residual conceit, I am, desire, I am, underlying tendency, I am, is uprooted, eliminated.
Is that residual conceit, is that Pali Canon?
No, the residual, the conceit is what's called asmi mana. Asmi is I am, mana is conceit. But there's also the bhavatana, craving for existence, is still there. And maybe the desire I am is a manifestation of that bhavatana. Okay, so the Buddha, coming back to the sutta, the discourse on the root, the Buddha says that he should not delight in earth. And then he says, for what reason? Why is that? Because he must fully understand it. So I wrote that on the board. Parinyayang. So that he can move from direct knowledge of the objects of perception on to the full understanding of them. Okay, and then the same pattern is developed for the other 23 bases of conceiving. Okay, at this point I'll ask, before we go on to the next section, whether there are any questions on what we've covered. Tsering? Yeah, Tsering in the...
Bhante, just to give us a clearer picture of this section, paragraph 27, if you could kindly give us an example to illustrate this point. For example, here they're talking about the earth element.
Yeah.
So let's say in our own daily experiences, we encounter experiences of meeting beautiful objects.
We can what?
Beautiful objects. So in that light, if you could kindly give us a little more elaboration.
Maybe let me go through and finish the discourse, and then I'll come back to that question.
Thank you, Bhante.
I just wanted questions that sort of relate directly to this section. Okay, so let us move on then. So now we come we move from the disciple and higher training to the arahant. The arahant is sometimes called useka. Useka means one who is not in training. But by not in training, it doesn't mean that somebody who doesn't take up the training at all, but rather the one who has completed the training. And so we have actually 3 or 4 sections on the arahant. Okay, so the first of these, we begin with a description of the arahant. He's one who has destroyed the asavas. The asavas are these very, very deep fundamental defilements of sensual craving, craving for existence, and ignorance. He has lived the brahmacharya, the holy life, vusita brahmacharya. Which means that he's completed the development of the path. The path is the holy life, and one who has completed the development of the path is said to have lived the holy life. He's one who has kattang or katta karaniyo, who has done what had to be done, which means that he's accomplished all of the tasks laid out by the Buddha of fully understanding the truth of suffering, abandoning craving, realizing nibbana, and fulfilling the development of the path. He's laid down the burden of the 5 aggregates, the burden of all defilements. He has reached his own goal. He has destroyed the fetters that bind one to existence, and he is completely liberated through final knowledge. Okay, so the arahant now is said that he too, like the trainee, directly knows earth as earth. And having directly known earth as earth, he does not conceive earth, he does not conceive in earth, he does not conceive apart from earth, he does not conceive earth to be mine, and he does not delight in earth.